Fragile that pilots thought they had to advance the throttles very slowly or run the risk of fire or mechanical failure. Consequently, if American fighters caught an Me-262 when it wasn't traveling at top speed, they had the advantage. In those situations, the new jet proved to be easy prey for Allied fighters. Other Me-262s were shot out of the sky by canny P-47 and P-51 pilots whose snapshot accuracy paid dividends.
He started climbing, and so I did, and I just started firing all the way through, and I kind of was firing all the way through when I was going up. And he went by me, and then I kind of fell out into an aleman because I'd lost a lot of speed. But I made an aleman up there, and then I rolled over like that to see the plane, and I laid down on it, went down again, and took some pictures of it. And so the guy said, well, the guy that got him spun out. I said, no, he didn't. I said, pretty sloppy but I said I didn't spin out. And then Comstock said, is that you, hotshot? I said, yeah, good for you. So we came home, we were pretty happy. That was the first group. And then they gave a half to another pilot. And I never saw his film, and I don't know how he hit the plane or whether he hit it or not. But I knocked the plane down.
By December, though the Germans were desperately deploying the Me-262, the Luftwaffe had been all but defeated. Desperate for pilots, General of the Fighters, Adolf Galland, began culling men from bomber and transport units to fill the cockpits of an ever-declining number of operational 109s and 190s. Fred Boost, an Me-323 Gigant pilot, was one such aviator caught up in the dragnet.
The transport wings and most of the bomber wings were disbanded. The pilots were sent to Berlin and were asked whether we would become fighter pilots. You couldn't say no. If you said no, you were transferred to the SS armor tank battalions, and that was the last I ever wanted to be. Here came Galland and said, all right, these are the first or the former transport flyers. Now, who of you hotshots does not want to become a fighter pilot? Who does not want to become a fighter pilot? Nobody raised his hand. He said, all right, you'll be fighter wing number 104 in Vienna. I said, sure.
Such men did not last long. With American planes scouring the daylight skies from Aachen to Warsaw and Prague, the Luftwaffe had no safe airspace in which to operate and train its new pilots. Fred Boost's experience was not atypical. In the few months he survived as an FW-190 pilot, American fighters shot him down twice. The last time occurred over his own airfield while he was landing.
We were supposed to protect Berlin, which was very easy to find. You had to look where there was a big smoke. That was Berlin. We were coming in. The P-51s were just circling around Wesendorf and just waited for us to land. And just as my turn came, okay, you are next, one of them picked me out, and I again was already not higher than maybe 30 feet. And just upon landing, he got me from behind and didn't wound me, but shot the plane not to pieces, but the undercarriage didn't get out and couldn't control it anymore. He must have hit not the cockpit, but the area around me, and I pancaked very hard.
And yet the Luftwaffe would not give up. On January 1st, 1945, Goering ordered a maximum effort strike against Allied airfields in France and Belgium. Dubbed Operation Bodenplatte, this last ground attack effort was designed to support the failing German offensive in the Ardennes. Over 1,000 single-engine fighters were flung at the British and American bases on the continent that day.
That morning, they surprised us. So much buzzing going on, so many engines running and so much noise at the airfield. and every plane that could fly had to get up. I think something like 2/3 came back and the others never made it back. And from what the pilots told us, they usually, I think mostly in France, they attacked planes on the ground by surprise, and I think were somehow successful and destroyed Allied planes on the ground.
In some places, they achieved complete surprise. Hundreds of Allied aircraft were destroyed on the ground, but few pilots or aircrew were killed. In return, the Luftwaffe lost almost 300 planes and 214 pilots, including 19 squadron and group commanders. It was a disaster that finally broke the back of the German fighter force.
After that, you hardly saw one going up. They had the plane still at this little airport, but they probably knew that it was useless to even try to get up, because if 2 or 3 went up, they were being intercepted by about 25 or 30 or whatever, you know. And at that point, the Messerschmitt was just no match anymore against something like the P-51.
Aside from sporadic penny packet interceptions, the Luftwaffe would never again seriously interfere with Allied air operations. From the once proud force that had dominated Europe only 5 years before, the Luftwaffe had become a shattered, broken force. Only the courage and individual devotion to duty of its fighter pilots kept the interceptor force from complete collapse.
By the end of the war, faced with what has essentially become a lost cause, it's only the individual devotion of these pilots of the Luftwaffe, the devotion to their homeland, their devotion to their duty as a soldier, that keeps them flying for this lost cause.
And yet the end would soon come. That spring, all across Germany, American, British, and Russian tank columns rumbled through the countryside, capturing cities, factories, and air bases as they went. For those few remaining defenders of the Reich, gas deliveries dried up. Ammunition became scarce, and replacement aircraft became only distant memories. The men waited for the end at their air bases, or in some cases took to the roads together in hopes of surrendering to American or British troops. Some of the most famous fighter groups were captured wholesale by the Russians, who showed no mercy.
We heard, rumors among boys about the treatment of the Russians, how their prisoners of war were treated by Germans, and how German prisoners of war were treated in Russia. And that was always a nightmare, that you were shot down over Russian territory.
Some of Germany's greatest aces disappeared into Soviet labor camps and were not seen again until the mid-1950s. For Fred Boost, the end came near the Danish border in the waning days of the war.
I'm sitting strapped in my plane, everything ready, and I am tired. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and it's May. It's still daylight, and I begin to doze off. And as I sit there, somebody very hard rattled the rudder. So my legs went. I cranked down the canopy and said, "Leave an old man alone." And I looked up and looked into a guy with a helmet,